back in their past life
exactly.
and divorced
this is
before they
something
knew
that,
about this stuff.
This is something that happened. Like, well, Kenny, he was in the army. He got married to this woman. Found out she was married to several soldiers. And divorced her. Now, here's the thing. If we are still held accountable for all the things that happened to us before we became a Christian, then what does that do to the work of Christ on the cross?
Can I say
Here's,
one thing?
well, just a second. Here's the thing. He was divorced before he knew what the law was. Before he followed the law. When we become Christians, we become new creatures, new people. Our old lives are passed away. That divorce is part of our old life.
I think when churches do that, I got to be very careful when I say this, but they're afraid to make a poster child out of the person, regardless of past, present, or future divorce, because once you open that gate open, that you got people say, "Oh, but Joe Snow's divorce," and it may have been before he became a Christian. People are going to use that for excuse.
But then the very answer would be,
right.
Are you doing the job of Satan? Because he is the one that stands before the throne of God and accuses the saints.
I'm just saying I think that's why.
You know what?
Well, like Ron,
I'm in doo-doo up to my nose. I've been divorced 3 times since I've been a Christian. Chew on that one for a
See,
while.
here's the thing, it's a lot more complex, I think, than what we're talking about here. We're just kind of hitting the basic level here. It's a lot more complex than this. But here's what my take on this is, kind of, is since it initially started out as a qualification for a pastor being not a polygamist, we're looking at, 50, 60 AD compared to probably 350 some AD, or whatever the Council of Laodicea was in the 3rd century. So we're talking about 300 years. Now, what transpired in that 300 years in the Roman Empire in that region? Well, I mean, when the gospel first came forth, it was full of pagans that practiced polygamy as well as Jewish people that practiced polygamy. Well, then by the 300s, Christianity had taken over, pretty much taken over the empire, and so then there wasn't so much polygamy, and then it became, I think, an issue about divorce, and that's just my personal take on it from a historical standpoint.
So why did it change, Pastor?
Council of Laodicea. They changed positions on this interpretation of this verse.
The divorce on that part also happened when the Catholic Church was the predominant so-called Christian faith in the world.
And the Word also says that what God has brought together.
No man. Now see, here's the deal.
teaching on divorce.
Here's the deal, though. I mean, my first wife was a Christian. Okay? You couldn't shake her faith when we first got married. Then she met someone and left the faith. Now, Paul says if an unbelieving partner wishes to leave, don't stop her. All right? I did my best to try and put the marriage back together, but she had no part in it.
Then you're not bound.
Exactly. See,
Then you're not
but
bound.
I am still a man of one wife.
Well, it says that God hates divorce.
That's the way I am having it.
It says that God hates.
You have no idea.
Yes.
Yeah, this is something that the churches have studied and argued and taken positions on all over the place. Let's keep in mind the basics. You do not have to be an elder, overseer, bishop, whatever word you want to use, to be able to preach the gospel. Not use the term preaching elder. Well, we read the qualifications and asked to teach, but you don't have to be an elder or a deacon to be able to carry out Jesus' command to preach the gospel. These two offices were given special qualifications for a special reason, especially in the case of the overseers. That's exactly function, what they're supposed to do, is oversee the church. Now, as Ron points out, in 300, long after this was written, they got together and decided to change the interpretation. Well, as may be. There are those of us who say we go back to the original and stick by it.
Well,
The additional point I was going to try to make was, remember Ron's comment earlier about, gambling being, okay if you do it properly. Like you said, if you paid your bills and your rent and everything, and you kept out some money left over for your entertainment budget, and that's how you want to spend it, no problem for you. But when other people see you doing it, it becomes problems for them. I think this is the same way. If you are known to be an elder in the church, and as we get farther down, a deacon in the church, you're held to a higher standard of conduct by people in the world, even if the book doesn't specifically address that topic.
St. Paul says, though, to every believer, abstain from the appearance of evil.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that goes back to the same part of the subject.
But let me
Ron could tell you, and I'm sure Dan can too, they've seen the publication called Gospel Minutes, which is published by people in the Church of Christ. They are constantly answering questions from people about, whether this person is qualified to be an elder, or what should be done in case X, Y, or Z, and all they can do is refer back to the scriptures, and again, appearance. One question we didn't even ask you: what happens if an elder's wife dies? Is he forced to resign the eldership, or can he continue as an elder?
Actually, Paul addresses that in the letter also. When you reach a certain age, you are considered to be a widow or a widower, not until.
So here's another one. Here's another curve. What if you're never married and a single, like Paul's wife? Timothy was. He was never married.
What's that, Daniel? Say that again. I didn't hear it.
An elder.
No, but he oversaw the churches, and he was never married.
Well, he was an evangelist.
Well, I know, but
He
I'm
was
saying.
told to go out and appoint elders.
Well, what I'm saying, though, is he's even over the deacons and the elders. They have to be married. But he was overseeing all the churches and didn't have to be married.
Well,
Who was that, Danny?
I know.
That was a different office. That was not the office of
Right.
bishop or overseer. That was the office of
I know that.
evangelist.
I know, but a lot of people ask that question, like, can you be single to be over?
Part of it is because in English we have confused the word pastor and what it means. I mean, people who biblically are evangelists are being called routinely pastor.
Can I say one thing?
Steve?
I'd like to say that we're all sheep, and we have one pasture, Pastor Ron.
Technically, we have one pastor, which is Jesus.
That was a pun. Daniel should have at least got that one.
It's like you're not out the pasture.
More questions here. Let's take it one at a time.
Just like to make a point. When you consider these qualifications, this is in the first century church, and these can be applied now to the true church. Look at what's out there in the world. Look at what's out there in the world right now going on with the NFL and the trouble they're getting into. They're looking at abusive relationships, child, beating, and so forth. Now these are football players. These are brutes, but they're focused on. They want the sport to succeed. They want everybody to be fans. They want families to be fans, and so forth. So they have an interest in having people represent their sport honorably. And even in baseball, they take them out for using steroids and so forth. Well, think about that. They're not doing it to be part of the church. They're doing it for the influence it has on others, and especially young people. How much more so then? How much more so we in the church to be examples for young people and for others that we might speak to, or that you might
Well,
Yeah,
it's not
because
just
that-
the NFL, it's the motion picture industry, it's television,
movies.
Yeah.
I mean,
But the NFL is trying to change the image.
too, but they're not.
The NFL is trying to change the
NFL's
image.
changing their image.
I'm just using that as an
homosexual
example.
to take a guy who's a Christian.
I'm using that as an example of where even a worldly organization is trying to clean up their act because of, they want to have favor with the fans. We certainly want to have favor with God and with anyone that we might speak to.
Rowdy, that would be like that Olympic swimmer, I can't remember his name, but they caught a picture of him taking a hit off a marijuana bong pipe, and he lost endorsements from it.
Michael Phelps. Yeah.
Michael Phelps, is that what it was?
Yeah, he's also been
Then
for DWI twice.
there's this actor Stephen Collins who played a preacher on a show called Seventh Heaven, and he was supposedly accused of being molesting children.
Okay, let me just go through these.
I was going to say, can we finally get on to the other phone?
Yeah, let me just go on to the rest of them. This is what I have, and I'll just throw it out there. And if you have anything else, the word blameless is actually first, and it means, in the Greek, it means nothing that can take hold of you. So that you be blameless, that there be no accusation that could be pinned on you.
Above reproach.
Yes.
Yeah, about the rest of
Successfully pinned on you.
Yes. We talked about husband and one wife. The next one is temperate, someone who is not given to extremes. Anybody got anything else other than that?
Everything done in moderation.
I think the word.
And that doesn't just refer to alcohol, like the old temperance rule.
I think what Paul's listing here is all the things he was not, or all the things he was not when he was a Pharisee.
Sober-minded, able to think clearly and with clarity. To be able to think clearly with clarity. Of good behavior, orderly, modest, dignified. Hospitable, willing to open up his home to friends and strangers. Able to teach, skilled in teaching Bible, one-on-one or in public.
You'd be surprised how many pastors I run across that have no idea how to teach.
Okay.
Did they ever truly become pastors? According to
Now we get to another controversial one. Not given to wine. Not given to drinking of wine. Strong's Greek word 3943, paranoos, not given to drink wine or staying near wine. Parenthesis, tavern.
Basically,
But,
my
my translation says not given to drunkenness.
Right.
It's like people, you'll see conservative Christians, and
Now
I've
we're
heard it
seeing the
said many
controversy.
times that Jesus didn't make real wine at the wedding, which is completely ridiculous because they served the good wine. They serve the good wine first, and when everybody gets a little bit tipsy, then they bring out the bad stuff. He saved the good stuff for last. So that was definitely, when the Jews would party for 3 days for a wedding, it was real wine. I've heard people try to say, oh, it was grape juice, barrels of grape juice.
You got to remember that Jesus said to take this wine to whom?
The steward.
Yeah,
The steward of the feast. He is like a professional caterer. If this man didn't know wine, he wouldn't be in the position he's in. And he tasted it, and it tastes like the best
he was the one that made that comment.
So he was the connoisseur?
He was the connoisseur.
But Paul would go to his own law because he's out of Timothy later on. He drinks a little wine for his son's sake because he's 6 11. So if the interpretation was, say, with all wine, he just goes his own.
Okay.
I know he's not saying that, but
According to the Greek translation here, it's not an excessive drinker. Now, the New American Standard kind of goes along halfway with what he said. It's not addicted to wine.
Now, in addition to that, my definition also, I'm getting this from someone else,
Yeah.
not indulging in brawling.